Hello and welcome to the Clinical Care Options Infectious Disease Podcast. I'm your host, Zachary Schwartz. Today's episode features audience questions from our recent symposium on RSV vaccines in older adults. It features Drs. Laura Hurley, John Russell, and Pamela Rockwell. Let's listen in as they discuss when an RSV vaccine may be approved and how to overcome barriers to its implementation.
So ACIP-wise, RSV vaccine, all these things have different dates. Is this something that the ACIP is going to wait till all the horses come in to talk about it? Is it going to be dribs and drabs? When do you guys practically think that this is something that might be on the shelves? If all the data is good, how long do you think till this is in our fridges?
Well, I think for the one vaccine that's already completed the phase 3 trial, if it gets approved by the FDA this year, I think it will be considered by ACIP in early 2023 with a possible recommendation. But I don't think historically ACIP has ever held out on making a recommendation until all manufacturers are ready for prime time.
Typically, October, February, and June are the 3 times ACIP meets. And that is set in stone. Like I said, with COVID, we have met, it's over 20 times. So they're not adverse to calling emergency meetings. And we all have to reschedule our patients and things. But I think for RSV, they're not going to hold off any longer than they have to because of the overlap with COVID and just another respiratory. So assuming that timeline is there, I can foresee it being in the perhaps February schedule. But, and I say but, it sometimes takes 2 meetings for the information all get presented and then dissected. And then the ACIP does its thing, but that doesn't mean they won't call a meeting in between.
So another question, this will be a brand new paradigm for us, right? We've never given RSV vaccines in our office. Say some get approved. I think the expectation for the people who make the vaccine is the vaccine is going to show up and then 100% of people are going to get it, right? And that's not what happens. How do you guys anticipate it's going to roll out? Will there be early adopters? Will our sickest patients take it? How do you think it's actually going to roll out to convince people right? Because it's not going to get approved for ACIP unless it's safe and effective. But that's not always how we convince our patients or even convince each other. It's something. So how do you guys think? Is it going to be early adopters? Is it going to be thought leaders? Is it going to be people are going to come to AFP, FMX and take that message home? How do you guys envision the proselytizing if one of these vaccines is actually proven to be safe and effective?
It's partly why I focused on the populations that the vaccine's been studied in, because for me, particularly with the recombinant zoster vaccine, there was a lot of interest in using that in the immunocompromised, because those are the patients that we see get horrific shingles. But when you looked at the primary trials, those individuals were not included. And so a lot of people I know from research I've done were just still giving the recombinant zoster vaccine in that population, which it wasn't a live virus vaccine and it was potentially safe, but you're absolutely right. It's difficult to go from these trials to implementing. Yes, there will always be early adopters, but there will also be conscientious family physicians who want to be sure that the vaccine is appropriate for their patient population.
Yeah, I really think it depends on how the recommendation is made. If it's a recommendation without shared decision making, it's just a general, you should give this vaccine to all people over 60. I think it will slowly get adopted. I think people who take vaccines and who accept vaccines as the modern miracle that they are will want to get that RSV vaccine so they can avoid hospitalization.
So what do you think the schedule is going to be? If you guys had to look into the future, do you view this as an annual, a one dose and then you're going to get it next year? Is it going to be one dose 6 months later, and then you're going to get what do you anticipate a schedule might look like?
And with my crystal ball and from reading these primary studies, I believe it will be an annual vaccine. And I think that's why one manufacturer is talking about combining RSV with flu and COVID potentially. And another manufacturer is already looking at it being co-administered with influenza.
Yeah. And if not, I can see it being, it's time for your flu, COVID, and RSV vaccine.
So one of the things with regard to vaccine hesitancy, I've heard that it takes 10 minutes to make someone vaccine hesitant, but about 4 years to undo that. Is that just misinformation I got from a pro-vaccine bot? Or is that a true fact?
I don't know if that's a fact, but that kind of sounds like it could be. I think people are generally afraid of what they don't know, and they didn't understand the mRNA vaccine, for instance, for COVID. But it's amazing how they'll buy all these supplements that are not tested or FDA approved for all kinds of ailments that they want to cure, but yet it's the shot. I think it's the needle part of it also that they think something's going in their body. So I have had some success in talking with patients, but you really have to have a trustful relationship back and forth. And that is not something that can happen at the urgent care, unless they're a frequent flyer to the urgent care. But it really is about trust. And that's where family medicine, to me, makes the most sense as, we're taking, in general, internal medicine. You develop relationships with people over time, and they trust you. And I've had many patients get vaccinated because I told them to, and they agreed.
So one of the questions, and I think we did talk about it, is we said a lot of things about RSV, and how come there hasn't been more of a clamor? And probably it's the early 60s failure. And then there was the vaccine that kind of died in a phase 3 clinical trial. Was that about 10 years ago?
About that, I think. Yeah.
Maybe less.
Yeah. So people have been scared off before. So it's not that I think for most of us, I think it was news to me how much burden and how much deaths there are from RSV. I think that's a fact we can take back to our partners that I don't think that we all think about because we weren't ever testing for it. Just an older patient with COPD had an exacerbation and died in the ICU. So I think this is at least something that we can kind of take back to our practices. We kind of represent the entire United States here at FMX, that we can kind of take that back, and maybe we'll have a vaccine when it comes out. And I think with talking about vaccines, and when I talk with my residents, some of the residents want to propose a vaccine like me asking out someone in junior high. Do you maybe want to, maybe that no one's going to trust, 13-year-old me with taking advice for a vaccine. And it really should be declarative. Jimmy needs his HPV, his meningococcal vaccine, and his TDAP vaccine. Do we do 2 in the right and 1 in the left, et cetera? And I think us being kind of more proponents. And I think the other thing is we let the vaccine hesitant folks to dominate our school board meetings, our public forums for whatever. So the question, who do you think more of this is coming from?
The point is, I think we can all do our part to sort of promote vaccines in our own way, whether it be on your Twitter account or on your own social media, or just promote if you're on Facebook. But I think we need to do more. And Laura and I were talking about how the CDC, I think, could do a little more innovative social media stuff for those people who are only getting their information off of social media. But I think they're trying.
So do you think this is going to be this mutation space race that we're going to come out with RSV vaccine and it's going to work for 6 months and then there's going to be another, or does it seem to be a little bit different?
I think that is a great question. I need to say I'm not an infectious disease expert, but I think coronaviruses were known going into this pandemic to mutate and mutate quickly. And I don't believe RSV has that same reputation. I think flu is more likely to mutate than even RSV, but don't quote me.
Agree.
So kind of a statement from one of the questions that came in is they have a lot of patients who are much more interested in older technology versus the mRNA technology. What do you think is going to win the race? Do you think it's going to be an mRNA vaccine or one of the non-mRNA vaccines is going to be first to market? If all data goes well.
Well, because one vaccine that's not mRNA has already been studied in a phase 3 trial, and at least the press release report is that the findings were positive, I think it's going to be a non-mRNA vaccine. But the fact of the matter is we have 5, and I can't think of another situation where other than the COVID situation, where we had 5 vaccines that were all kind of come in to, regulation and then possibly market so quickly.
The New York Times when the COVID pandemic was in full actually had a thing that you could look and it could see where all the vaccines were in development. There were 34. So I always thought that was really cool. And it's very reminiscent of all these things that are potentially coming to market. We're coming up on our last minute. Do you guys have a final thought?
I just want to emphasize, I understand that there's a lot of sort of vaccine hesitant stuff in the media. I'm a believer that if we use the evidence-based practices to vaccinate, it works. And that means having standing orders for all routinely recommended vaccines, if it's permitted where you practice. Using reminder recall for especially multi-dose vaccines like the recombinant zoster vaccine or a hepatitis vaccine, using physician recommendation, using the IIS. We just don't use these systems that have been shown in clinical trials to work. And it's because we have so much else that we want to do. So I just wanted to say about the 20% that didn't like the share model. I don't know who they were, but that takes time. And you guys, we're all seeing people that don't have one problem and they're not just coming in to talk about a vaccine. So we need these other strategies that kind of take it out of our plate and get it done. Sorry to take up the minute, but.
No, that's fine. In the share strategy also can be shared with your nurse or your medical assistant, and it can be a whole team effort there.
And really, we are the healthcare that America needs. Primary care is the healthcare that America needs. And every study about vaccines, the person who they're going to trust the most is not Karen, is not the bot, is not Dr. Wayfield, it's us. And our relationships with our patients is what's going to matter. And I think it's important if we only get it into 50% of the people who need it, that's going to be still less sadness, less people who are going to not have a parent there at the holidays, not have someone there on their birthday and things like that. And I think we need to dwell on our successes and not necessarily the people who didn't get the vaccine. So I think there's a lot of people who will be very happy to not have another COPD exacerbation next year.
Well, thank you for this discussion, and thank you all for listening. To learn more about RSV in older adults, see the link in the show notes, and tune into our podcast for future episodes on other infectious disease topics.